The rain started in the late afternoon, soft at first and then steady, tapping against the windows of the small house Emily Carter shared with her husband Daniel in a quiet Portland neighborhood. And that rain felt like a warning even though neither of them said it out loud, because the house had been too quiet for too long. The kind of quiet that settles in when words feel heavy and conversations feel risky. And Emily stood near the kitchen counter pretending to organize things that didn't need organizing while Daniel sat on the couch scrolling through his phone without really seeing it, both of them aware that something between them had slowly slipped away over the past 2 years, not love but closeness, not care but warmth, and they didn't fight or shout or blame, which somehow made it harder, because there was no clear problem to fix, only a distance that kept growing, and that evening felt different from the start because Michael was coming, Daniel's older brother, someone Emily had always respected for his calm nature and thoughtful way of speaking, a man who lived in Vancouver, Canada, and rarely visited, but when he did, the house always felt fuller, like the air itself relaxed, and when Michael arrived, shaking rain from his jacket and smiling in that quiet, reassuring way of his, Emily noticed immediately how his presence changed the mood, how Daniel sat up straighter and spoke more freely, how laughter returned to the room without effort, and they talked about simple things over dinner, work, travel, old family memories, but underneath it all, Michael was watching, noticing the small pauses between Emily and Daniel, the way they avoided touching, the careful politeness that replaced affection. And after dinner, when Daniel stepped outside to take a work call, Michael and Emily were left alone at the table with the rain filling the silence. And Michael broke it gently, asking how she really was, not as a polite question but as someone who truly wanted to know. And Emily hesitated because she wasn't used to honesty anymore, not even with herself, but something about the way Michael looked at her, patient and open, made the truth spill out faster than she expected. And she spoke about feeling tired all the time, about missing the feeling of being close to someone without effort, about how she and Daniel still cared but felt like they were walking beside each other instead of together. And Michael didn't interrupt or offer quick advice. He just listened, nodding slowly. And when she finally stopped speaking, embarrassed by how much she had said, he told her quietly that long marriages don't break in one moment, they were down slowly, and that it didn't mean they were failures, only human. And that single sentence stayed with Emily longer than she expected, because it felt like understanding instead of judgment. And when Daniel returned, the conversation shifted back to normal, but something had already changed inside Emily, a feeling she couldn't name yet. And later that night, after Daniel went to bed early, exhausted, Michael stayed up on the couch, looking around the living room filled with framed photos of better times, and when Emily brought him a blanket, their hands brushed briefly. Nothing wrong, nothing planned, but the moment lingered longer than it should have, and Michael thanked her and said, almost to himself, that he hated seeing good people struggle in silence, and Emily replied that sometimes silence felt safer than saying the wrong thing, and Michael looked at her then and said that silence can also be the thing that breaks people slowly, and that was when he said the words that would stay with her all night, telling her that he wanted to help, not fix, not interfere, just help in whatever way truly mattered. And Emily didn't answer him right away because she wasn't sure what help even meant anymore, but as she lay awake beside Daniel later, listening to the rain and feeling the familiar distance between them, she realized that Michael's presence had stirred something she thought was gone, not desire or temptation, but hope mixed with fear, and she understood that sometimes help arrives quietly, wrapped in kindness, and you don't know whether to welcome it or be afraid of what it might reveal. Michael stayed longer than anyone expected, first because of a delayed return flight and then because no one asked him to leave. And with each passing day his presence began to change the rhythm of the house in small but noticeable ways. Mornings became less quiet. Dinners felt warmer, and laughter appeared without effort, and Emily noticed how Daniel seemed more relaxed around his brother, more open, as if Michael reminded him of who he used to be before life became heavy. And Emily herself felt lighter too, not because problems were solved but because someone was finally seeing them without pressure. And Michael never pushed or judged. He helped with simple things, fixed a loose cabinet door, cooked meals when Emily worked late, and listened when Daniel spoke about work stress and feeling like he was failing without knowing why. And during the long hours when Daniel was away, Emily and Michael talked, sometimes over coffee, sometimes while walking through nearby streets wet with rain. and their conversations moved quickly past small talk into deeper places, about missed chances, about how easy it is to lose yourself while trying to be strong for others, and Emily found herself saying things she had never said out loud, admitting that she often felt invisible, not unloved but unseen, and Michael told her that feeling ignored hurts more than being alone, and those words stayed with her because they felt true. And one afternoon by the river, as gray clouds hung low over the water, Emily confessed that she missed being emotionally close to someone, missed feeling understood without explaining herself, and Michael stopped walking and looked at her carefully, choosing his words with care, telling her that she mattered more than she realized and that her feelings were valid, and that moment lingered longer than either of them expected, not because of anything said or done, but because of what was felt, a quiet pull neither wanted to name. And at home Daniel began to sense a shift. Not jealousy but awareness. He noticed Emily smiling more often and speaking with more confidence, and he felt both grateful and uneasy, unsure whether Michael was helping them heal or simply showing what had been missing. And one night after dinner, Daniel admitted to Michael that he felt lost in his own marriage, that he loved Emily but didn't know how to reach her anymore. And Michael listened the same way he always did, calmly and without judgment, and told Daniel that distance doesn't mean the end. It means something needs attention, and Daniel nodded but still felt the fear sitting heavy in his chest, because he could feel change coming and didn't know what it would cost, and Emily felt it too, especially in the quiet moments when she realized how much she looked forward to talking with Michael, how his presence made her feel steady and understood, and that realization scared her more than anything else, because it wasn't about crossing a line, it was about standing too close to it. And one evening while washing dishes, Emily admitted softly to Michael that she was confused by her emotions, that she didn't want to hurt Daniel and didn't want to lose the peace they were slowly finding, and Michael told her honestly that caring deeply for someone doesn't always mean acting on it. Sometimes it means stepping back even when it's hard, and that answer comforted her and broke her heart at the same time. And as days passed, the three of them existed in a careful balance, sharing meals, sharing space, sharing truth in pieces, and the house felt alive but fragile, like glass under pressure. And late one night Michael overheard Emily and Daniel talking in their bedroom, not arguing but speaking honestly about their distance, their fears, and their exhaustion, and Michael stood in the hallway listening, realizing that his presence had brought things to the surface that could no longer be ignored, and for the first time since arriving, he questioned whether staying was truly helping or quietly complicating everything. And as he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, he understood that good intentions do not always lead to easy outcomes, and that sometimes helping means knowing when to step back before feelings grow into something that cannot be undone. The tension that had been building for days finally surfaced on a quiet Sunday evening when the house felt too small for the emotions inside it, and Daniel asked Michael to sit with him on the back porch where the air was cool and the city lights were distant. And Daniel spoke without anger but with honesty, admitting that he could see the change in Emily and feel the shift in himself, that he knew Michael never meant to cause pain, but that the situation scared him because it showed how far he and Emily had drifted. And Michael listened closely, his face serious, and told Daniel that he never came to take anything from them, only to support them, and that if his presence caused harm, he was ready to leave immediately. And those words stayed heavy in the air as both men sat in silence, understanding that this was no longer about comfort but about truth. And inside the house Emily waited, her heart racing, knowing the conversation was happening but unsure how it would end. And when they finally came inside, the three of them sat together, no one standing, no one walking away, and Emily spoke first, saying that pretending nothing was happening was hurting them more than facing it, and she admitted that she had felt lonely and unseen for a long time, not blaming Daniel but sharing her truth. And Daniel listened without interrupting, feeling the weight of her words but also relief that they were finally being said. And he admitted that he had buried himself in work because it felt safer than facing emotional failure. And Michael watched them both, realizing that the space between them was filled with unspoken pain rather than a lack of love. And when Michael stood up and said he would leave to protect their marriage, Emily felt tears fall, not because she wanted him to stay for herself, but because she feared losing the calm honesty his presence had created. And Daniel surprised them both by asking him to sit back down, saying that running from the truth would only take them back to silence, and that maybe help. didn't mean choosing sides but creating space for honesty, and the three of them spoke for hours, slowly and carefully, setting boundaries, naming fears, and agreeing that no one would act on emotion without respect. And there were no dramatic confessions or promises, only a shared decision to face what they had avoided for years. And that night ended quietly, with Michael sleeping in the guest room, Emily and Daniel lying awake together, not touching but aware of each other in a way they hadn't been for a long time. And in that stillness, Emily realized that desire was not the real issue, honesty was, and Daniel understood that love could survive discomfort if given truth. And Michael lay awake as well, staring at the ceiling, knowing that helping them meant staying present without crossing lines, even if it hurt. And by morning the house felt different, not lighter, but clearer, as if a storm had passed and left the ground wet but honest, and all three of them knew that whatever came next would be shaped by the choices they made from that moment forward, not by fear, but by care and responsibility. Michael left early on a quiet morning, his suitcase by the door and the sky still pale. And the goodbye was gentle but heavy with emotion, no long speeches, no promises that could not be kept, just honest looks and sincere words. And Emily thanked him for his kindness and for the calm he had brought into their lives. And Daniel hugged his brother with real gratitude, knowing that Michael had helped by holding up a mirror rather than taking control. And when the door closed, the house felt emptier but not broken. And in the days that followed, Emily and Daniel faced the silence they once feared. But this time it felt different because it was chosen, not avoided. And they began rebuilding their connection in small, steady steps, talking more openly, admitting when they felt unsure, and listening without rushing to defend themselves. And they sought help together, learning how to speak with honesty and patience. And though progress was slow, it felt real. And Michael stayed in their lives from a respectful distance, sending short messages of encouragement from Vancouver and checking in without stepping into their space. And Emily often thought about that strange season when everything could have fallen apart but didn't, realizing that attraction had never been the true challenge, but loneliness and unspoken needs were. And one evening months later, as Emily and Daniel sat on the porch watching the sunset, she leaned against him and felt a quiet sense of peace, not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest. And Daniel squeezed her hand, understanding that their marriage had been reshaped rather than rescued. And far away, Michael watched the same sunset from his apartment, feeling at peace with his choice, knowing that helping sometimes means stepping back at the right time, and that love, when handled with care, does not demand more than people can give. And in the end, none of them got exactly what they expected, but all of them gained clarity, growth, and respect. And the story that began with confusion ended with understanding, proving that true help is not about desire or control, but about responsibility, restraint, and the courage to let people find their own way forward.